Hey everybody, this is Peter with Tabletop Gaming Guild, and I'm coming to you today with another video focusing on the Runes of Symbaroum 5e by Free League Publishing. We previously did a video where we discussed and took a look at the player's guide, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Game Master's Guide. So again, if you've not heard of Runes of Symbaroum, it is a game that is being built upon the core mechanics of the fifth edition of the world's most popular role-playing game. And because it has an open gaming license, Free League has taken their Symbaroum setting, which they have a whole run of books on for their own game mechanics, their own world. They're taking that world and they're putting it into the fifth edition game mechanics. Combat is going to happen the same as it normally would with fifth edition, but they have taken some of the mechanics and adjusted them some to fit their world. They've put out the Game Master's Guide, a player's guide, and then also their own bestiary. So they've got their own creatures, and we're going to take a look at that. We haven't looked at that book yet, but we're going to look at that as well and do a video on that. But today's video is for the Game Master's Guide. We're going to open it up. We're going to flip through it a little bit. We're not going to go into really great detail because there's a lot of material here, but we're going to flip through so that you can see what is available to you as a game master in this book and whether or not you would be interested in running a game set in this world or not. So again, if you're a player, if you're not interested in running the game, this probably is not a book that you're going to be interested in. But if you are a game master, you're somebody who runs games for your friends, then this is going to be one of the books that you're definitely going to need to get in order to run Runes of Symbaroum 5e. So let's go ahead and take the book down to the table. We'll open it up. We'll flip through, kind of go over each of the sections, and then we'll come back up from the table and I'll give you my final thoughts on the Game Master's Guide for Runes of Symbaroum 5e. All right, everybody. So we're down to the table with Runes of Symbaroum 5e Game Master's Guide. We're going to flip over the book and we're going to read the back just to get a little bit idea of what is inside. With the Runes of Symbaroum game line, the acclaimed setting of Symbaroum comes to the world's most popular role-playing game rules. This beautifully illustrated Game Master's Guide offers inspiration, guidelines, and optional rules that will help you when designing adventures and running game sessions in the world of Symbaroum using the 5th edition OGL rule set. Time to prep and plan. Have your players uncover the secrets of Thistlehold, Yonderos, and Karvosti, or develop your own adventure sites in the Symbaroum setting. Send the player characters into the Forest of Davokar on treasure hunts, holy missions, or to establish an outpost while facing pre-planned or randomly generated challenges. Determine what type of rewards to bestow on the adventurers, be it traditional treasure, mystical artifacts, new feats, pacts with creatures or factions, or even a domain of their own to govern. The Symbaroum setting can be the staging ground for many kinds of adventures, and this book helps you make the world your own. So again, Runes of Symbaroum by Free League Publishing. Let's go ahead and open it up and see what we have inside. So we've just got our regular title page here with all of our credits for everyone who participated in the creation of the book. And then we have here our table of contents. So the book itself is broken up into 6 sections. There's the Game Master Guidelines, the World of Symbaroum, Expeditions into Davokar, Setting and Adventure Design, New and Optional Rules, and Blight Night. So Blight Night is a short adventure landscape that they have to showcase, and they will reference it sometimes in the book so that you can see how to create your own adventures. They just give you this as an example, but you can also run it if you would like. And we're going to flip through pretty quickly these different sections and not getting too deep into each one just because there is so much here for you as a game master that it would just take hours and hours to go through the whole thing. So we're not going to do that. Obviously, we're going to flip through, give you a little bit of an idea about each of the sections. And then hopefully, if you are interested, you can go get yourself a copy and dive head first the way that I have. So let's go ahead and flip over the book through the introduction here to our first section, Game Master Guidelines. So let's go ahead and get into the Game Master Guidelines now. And this is set up to give you an idea of how to run the game and they give you some ideas for before your session and during your session. And this is kind of your general information for a game master. It's going to be probably a lot of stuff that you as a game master might already know, but it is definitely worth giving a look at, just because it's a good way to remind yourself of why you're running the game and how you can take into account your players and their desires as well when running the game. Something that I really like here, though, in this short section is their Game Master Techniques portion, where they give you some very different ideas on possibly how to start running the game, kick off the adventure, or just ways to run it that might be slightly different or new. The one that really stood out to me was the alternative characters paragraphs, and they give you like a quick little example, but with the idea being that maybe you give your players each multiple characters, or maybe they just get one other character, and the idea being that you can run a session with one set of characters, and then you can run another adventure, another session with their other characters, with the idea that maybe even these storylines are happening at the same time, but you're getting to see a different part of the world, or you're seeing the same part of the world, but from maybe a different social hierarchy structure with your different characters. I thought that was a really cool idea, but that is what this whole section is here, is just ideas on how to maybe start or to run the game with some different techniques. So then they get into employing the rules of the game. And when they get into this is a lot of 5e or 5th edition information. They talk about the different difficulty classes, the ability checks and saving throws. If you run 5th edition before, this is not going to be a whole lot of new information for you. But if you're running 5th edition for the first time and you're coming to it because you've played Symbaroum before and now you want to run Runes of Symbaroum, then this is going to be a really good section to kind of give you some examples of the different types of abilities and their checks and the saving throws that come into play with 5th edition. So you can kind of scroll through these few pages here. Here is where they mention specifically that combat is the same in Runes of Symbaroum as it is in regular 5th edition. They're not making any big changes to the combat specifically. And they get into challenge ratings and how to properly adjust the difficulty of your challenges for your party's level. And they give you that difficulty class ranges down here at the bottom that you also will see on the Game Master's screen if you end up purchasing one of those. And this just gives you a range of whatever level the players are and how likely they are to succeed when the difficulty challenge of a roll is a specific set of numbers. So a lot of information here, just again, employing the rules of the game, their information on time in the game, and then also shadow and corruption, which is a very new portion of the game. So this would not be if you've run 5e and you knew all this other stuff. This is something that you may not know if you've not played in Runes of Symbaroum or Symbaroum. And that is the idea that, again, in this world, the theme, the overarching theme of Runes of Symbaroum is civilization versus nature, cultivation versus the chaos of just nature unchecked by civilizations. And the idea that as people, as creatures began to try to cultivate the land and the world fights back. And so there's this shadow and this corruption that comes into play for your characters and the world. And now we're going to be getting into section 2, which is the world of Symbaroum itself. The Runes of Symbaroum takes place in a very kind of local place in the world at large. So the idea being that there probably is a bigger world out there. You're just not going to be playing your game in that world. You're going to be playing in this more localized section. And this is going to give you information on each of the very important places and some of the people that are in that area of the world. So there is Thistlehold, which is a small location that is on the edge of the large forest of Davokar, where a lot of your adventures will take place. Thistlehold is kind of like the last bastion of civilization before entering the forest. And so there's a lot of really good information in here about how Thistlehold was set up, who set it up, and the important personages who call it home, and the places that your players and adventurers may be able to utilize in their downtime or when they're resting in between their adventures. So you can go through this section finding out all of that information. There's also sections on areas of conflict in that area of the world. And then again here, the player characters in Thistlehold, how your characters can get housing and equipment and all of those good things as well. And then it even gives you here at the end some missions to perform, and so give you a little hook for your players when they're in Thistlehold. The next place is Yonderos, which is the capital of the Queen of Ambria. Ambria is her domain. All of these places are within her domain, but Yonderos is her capital. And so as you go through this section, you're going to be seeing probably where Thistlehold is kind of the edge of civilization. It's a rough and tumble. It's the Wild West. Yonderos is it's the city. It is a place that has been cultivated almost as much as it can be. The queen rules from here. And so you're going to get higher society of people here, which probably just leads to more seediness and darkness than would be anywhere else, because where power is, power corrupts. And again, that's part of this game as well. Again, the more powerful you are, the more you're trying to change things and change the world, that corruption starts to bleed in. So Yonderos is going to have, I'm sure, a lot of that. So you're going to go through here and read about the districts of Yonderos and the places that your players could possibly visit, people and places of interest as well. And that is going to be it for Yonderos. Next is Karvasti. Karvasti is actually in the forest of Davokar, but it's raised up on a cliff. And the barbarian tribes have this is where their chieftain has been living, and is a place where if your players can get into the forest of Davokar, this could still possibly be a place where they might be able to get away from the immediate dangers and maybe get an extended rest, possibly. So you're going to want to know this location as well, and your players are going to need to find out about it so that they have a place where they can maybe run to if they're completely surrounded in the forest. But Karvasti is a very interesting place, kind of in the midst of the shadow itself in the forest of Davokar. So lots of great information here about what your players will find when they visit that location. And then we finish here with Under, Above, and Beyond, where we talk a little bit about the underworld, which if you've read up in the player's guide about trolls, you will know a little bit about the underworld and its peoples and cultures. And then beyond that, we talk about the Yonder world, which I don't want to give too much away here for everybody, but the Yonder world is hinted at and is believed by some that this is where people came to Symbaroum from, is this Yonder world. It's a blighted land, it's in ruins, and not super likely that your initial adventures will take place here, but it is a possibility if you would like to dive into it and do a little creation of your own. And then there is the spirit world as well, which, as you can guess, is the place where spirits can go on their way to the beyond. Section 3 is expeditions in Davokar. So this is a fantastic section as a game master. So everything before this has mostly been lore and very general running the game information. Starting with section 3, you get into the more meat and bones of the game itself. your players are going to be more than likely going on missions into the forest of Davokar. And so this section kind of walks you through the different types of missions that are available to your players. In general, of course, you can come up with more on your own, but some of the ideas that they give you are obviously like kind of the very generic treasure hunts, or just going out and exploring, maybe doing some missionary work. Maybe your people have like a holy order that they are a part of, and they're going out there to reach the peoples within Davokar. And then there's manhunts where they might be going after a specific individual that has fled from the authorities. And then we get into movement in Davokar itself. This game takes, it seems to want to, so next we go into movement in Davokar, and in this game, movement and the idea of some more fiddly bits than in 5e. There is the idea of encumbrance in 5th edition, but in a lot of the games that I've played or I've run, it's never really come into play because the journeying mechanics of the game were never fully fleshed out for me. I never quite understood what they were hoping to do. In this game, journeying is more perilous, and so they have given us a little bit more to do when it comes to the actual traveling in the world and keeping track of where you are as you explore into the forest specifically. And so we've got here a little hex map, and it's going to be hard to see in this video, but the hexes, the outlines of them are in either white or a slightly yellow or even a slightly more red hex around the outside, and that is showing you that you're either in bright Davokar, wild Davokar, or the dark Davokar. And traveling can change within each of those different places. They have here some more information about encumbrance and making sure that you have the provisions you need when going into Davokar. And then they have here some information about having guidance while you're in the wilderness, and then also if you were to fail some of your wilderness checks as you are traveling, some misfortunes that could possibly fall upon your group. And they have here a total of 30 misfortunes that could happen to your group, just again to seed a little bit more of the adventure, making it feel difficult. And that is kind of a big part of the Runes of Symbaroum, is the difficulty with which one goes into and gets out of Davokar. There's a whole section here on planning your expeditions, making sure that your players take the time to get their characters fully prepared. Maybe they're needing to go out and get a map, and maybe even draw their own map of the game itself. Getting a license to go exploring is also a thing in this game. So it's not just anybody is supposed to be able to go into Davokar and go exploring and come out with possible wealth or treasure. There are licenses to pay people that you need to pay off in order to go. Possibly getting a guide and getting other companions to travel along with your party. There's information here about getting a monster hunter or a sellsword or an interpreter or a mystic to go with you to help make your journey maybe a little bit easier. But don't forget, it's another mouth to feed. And so lots of information there on that. And then there are some events that they have laid out for you as tables that you can add into your game. So again, some of this can be prepped ahead of time, or you can be rolling on these charts to randomly generate these different either runes for locations, encounters that the party might come up against, or enemies that they might have to fight as well. So nice little section there on events. Also a little rolling table for the terrain that the players might find themselves in, which can adjust different rolls that they might have to make. There's also a section here on the treasures that your players might find in the runes, and there are tables here for you to roll on to see what kind of treasures they may come across. There are curiosities, there are mystical treasures, and there are artifacts as well. So each one of those have a different table that you can roll on with a page number taking you to that item if it is necessary. There's even here a section on giving you more details on the runes themselves, which you can roll on these charts. Again, all of this is you creating, either preparing ahead of time or rolling and randomly generating these things. For me personally, I have to prep ahead of time. Trying to do this at the table would just be way too much anxiety for me. So that would be outside of my realm for sure. But lots of different information here, runes per level, the details of the rooms themselves, entryways to other levels, inhabitants of that rune. So if you're wanting to create a rune, this is the section of the book that you would go to, and you would roll on these charts or choose from them. And then if you want to get into expanded missions, so a lot of this stuff here before this is talking about kind of doing one shots almost, or short adventures. But if you want to start laying out some expanded missions, or more of what I would call a campaign for your players, this section here kind of gives you a really good outline of a few options. So maybe your players have a goal together to establish a brand new outpost, or maybe they've been hired by somebody to go into Davokar and establish a new outpost. Well, this breaks down what the writers of this book believe to be the 5 phases that they would have to go through in order to establish that outpost. And then it's on you as the GM to turn that into actual play sessions. So phase 1, they call it the claim, where the players are getting the claim to actually go out and establish the outpost and go out there and claim it. And then phase 2 is the beginning of construction. Phase 3 is harvesting. So they've established their kind of baby outpost, and now they're getting their first harvest in. Vending, as they set up the commerce within their outpost. And then possibly phase 5, which is even growth, which is growing their outpost to make it a larger place where even more people would want to come on their journeys into Davokar. So that's just one of the expanded missions that they kind of have here for you. They've also got Conquest, where your players are going to go out and take over people groups maybe in the area. Again, Holy Mission, where they're going out and trying to either convert people or to establish some sort of church as well. And then there is a Monster Hunt, which I think that one would be a lot of fun. And they break it down into these different phases for you, each one of them being 5 phases. So they've also got staging and expedition as well. So that whole section there, I think, is going to be very, very useful for a GM who is wanting to set up a campaign, but maybe you have a hard time coming up with your own outline. They've done that for you here for these, what was it, like 5 or 6 expanded missions that they've come up with for you. They've given you a kind of not a super detailed outline, but at least the beginnings of an outline and the different phases that it could be. And each of those phases might take 1 or 2 sessions of gameplay. So that is a lot of possibility, where they didn't just give you a pre-written adventure, but they gave you the outline of one that you can expand on yourself. Section 4, setting and adventure design. We're kind of going to go through this even quicker, because this whole section of the book is all about, if you are wanting to really design your own adventures, here are the building blocks to do that. So this is, I think, a great addition for a Game Master's Guide that you don't see in a lot of other books. And this is the people who wrote this book distilling their knowledge of adventure building and giving it to the Game Master. They're wanting to take you through what it is that they have learned and give you that knowledge so that you can build off of their previous, I'm sure, sometimes mistakes and successes. And so they're going to give you the building blocks for building a game world. And then also not just the game world itself, but they're going to give you the process by which they kind of walk through building the adventure and managing and presenting that adventure to the players. So that section, I think, is really useful and really handy, and I really have to give them a huge thank you for that, because I think it's going to help a lot of game masters who either haven't run before or have trouble when it comes to building their world and their game. There's a lot of great advice out there online, but I've not really seen too many role-playing companies put out books, or at least inside their Game Master guides, that much level of detail when it comes to building a world or building an adventure. And I think it's just a great thing for them to offer up. Same kind of thing here is the adventures and the landscapes themselves, building those classic adventures, giving you some more ideas about setting up scenes within the adventures. It's still the exact same thing where they're just giving you all of their knowledge. And I think that is a huge benefit to the game master who gets this book. They even get down into more where you're chronicling it, or what is a chronicle, and that is talking about your adventure kind of spanning this large, huge timeline, and what that possibly could look like with chronicles. They also get into rewards and magical treasures, and they explain a little bit about how they feel as you're giving your players either experience points to level up their characters, or magical treasures that are going to help, or their equipment that are going to build up their characters, kind of trying to teach you how to find that balance. Where do you want to be giving your players a whole lot of abilities with leveling up their characters, or do you want to just give them more ability to withstand the treacheries of going out and adventuring? So an interesting section here where they talk about kind of early in an adventurer's career, mostly getting them more of equipment, and then later in their career, helping them to gain more levels with their character, so they're gaining more abilities throughout the game itself. And then also gets into old heroes as well. And it talks about the different types of rewards that you can give them beyond just experience and artifacts, but the idea of giving them some boons or even burdens as rewards, which you can read about in this and also in the player's guide. Pact making, maybe there's a higher level creature out there who would like to make a pact with your players as some sort of reward. Monstrous traits that the players might take on through those pacts. And then Princes of Land, talking about maybe gifting your players a domain that they have to manage. And there are rules in this that we're going to get to here in a little bit that talk about managing those domains. So it shows you here some of the what they say, the OGL, the open game license magic items. So these are the magic items that you would find descriptions of in the 5th edition core books, in that Game Master's Guide, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you would see these magic items listed in there and what they do. But these are the ones that are in the open game license, and so they're available to Free League Publishing to put in Symbaroum here. And then it also talks about creating greater artifacts, and then it gives you this huge list of greater artifacts that they've created. And with each of these artifacts, I think this is awesome. They give you a little information about the artifact itself, what the artifact can do, and then also an adventure setup for that specific artifact, which I think is awesome. So not only are they giving you the artifact and what it can do for your players, but it's giving you, the game master, a specific hook to possibly put before your players in order to get that item, which I think is pretty darn awesome. And there are quite a few pages of those greater artifacts. You just see me keep flipping here. So that was probably at least 15 pages of just greater artifacts that they've already created for you. And again, before that, they gave you some information on how to create your own greater artifacts. And then section 5, so this is the last section before the little adventure at the end of the book, has the new and optional rules that they have created for Runes of Symbaroum. So these are new and optional rules on top of the OGL 5e rules that you'll be playing with. They give you some really cool information about traps as challenges. They give you some really great examples of magical traps that you could put before your players, as well as mechanical traps that you could put before the players as well. They give you clues, they give you the mechanism itself, and then they give you the solution. So they break down each of these traps for the game master so that you understand them. They also get into some optional rules for ceremonies within the game and how your players may interact with those ceremonies, whether they're trying to stop the ritual, the ceremony from happening, or whether they want it to happen, is a really cool addition to this one as well. They get into the mystical ceremonies, and then they're giving you the ceremonies themselves here and kind of what they're trying to bring into the world. So there's a few of those. So in the player's guide, I think the thing that really caught my attention the most was their tweaking of the resting mechanics, the resting rules. But for this book, for the Game Master's Guide, I think this right here is the optional rule, or the new rule that I think will be what I decide I want to play around with. And that is the rules for inciting a chase, and how to kind of, with roles and with narrative, try to make a chase scene happen, which I've definitely played in 5th edition games before, where chases begin and it's all about character. We go from combat where the characters are playing maybe on a mat with their little miniatures, and then all of a sudden you're trying to get into the headspace of how do you show the chase happen. And reading through this, I thought this was a really cool way to try to make that happen. And so I'm very excited to give the optional rules for a chase scene a go at the table. And like I said, the great thing about this is being 5e is I can take this. I don't even have to be running Runes of Symbaroum. I can still be running 5th edition games, and I can add this into it as well. So the chase scene is pretty cool. They give you obstacles in the chase that your players might come against, whether they're common obstacles, or maybe they're in the cities and the farmlands and the obstacles they might face there, or even obstacles they might face while in the Forest of Davokar itself. So earlier I mentioned that they talked about possibly rewarding your players with a domain to run. Well, here are the optional rules for helping them to manage that domain. It gets down into kind of some very nuts and bolts of the fact that what type of domain is it? Is it a fortified farm, a normal village, a small market town? The fact that it breaks it down into 4 times a year with the spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Your character who is managing that town will have to go through the management of it. And that is going to have 3 parts to it, which is a major event could possibly happen. And there's a table to roll on for what major event is happening. Then there is a management check that the player who is in charge has to roll to see how well they handle that major event. And then possibly an investment phase as well, as they try to build up and grow their domain, and maybe even fortify it against enemies, or whatever it is they want to do with their investments. So I think this is a cool, not too heavy rules version of managing a domain, in case you have a player who has those grand aspirations of becoming a ruler in the world. So it's not so heavy that it's going to really bog things down, and this might be a really good thing to do in between sessions, not at the table with the whole crew, but with the people who find that part of the game interesting. So that's domains. There's a little bit more information here that breaks down the idea of making pacts with greater beings in the world, and how that can be beneficial but also detrimental to the players. There's more information on the social challenges rules that they also talked about in the player's guide that I absolutely love. So this is something else I will definitely be using in my game. And that is making those role play moments where your characters are in a social situation, giving it a little bit more of a mechanics and kind of a play-by-play that you can do with your players to make those social challenges seem a little bit more interesting and fleshed out. There's some information here on just the peoples of Ambria and Davokar. And then there's some information on troop play, which is, again, a little bit more information on if you're giving your characters, your players, multiple characters to run and mixing up your sessions, where one session they're playing this set of characters, and then in the next session they're playing a different set of characters. And maybe with that, you can see the same world, but from a different social class or a different people group, which I think has a really cool possibility to it. Maybe you play one session as a tribe of goblins on the outskirts of the forest of Davokar, and then the next session they're playing the characters who have been sent to go out there and root out this people group of goblins so that they can turn their home into an outpost for adventurers. I don't know. That's just a quick idea that I had there. So troop play so that you can see the world from different angles. And I think that that could be a really interesting way to play the game also. And then here towards the very end of the book, they do give us some optional rules if your players are into larger wars and or battle play. They give you a pretty decent set of rules here for trying to bring that to bear at the table so that your players can have those combats at the table to see what a grand scaled battle would look like with the runes of Symbaroum. So that is also really nice that they've added that in there. I have not played at too many tables where we get into those larger scale wars and battles. I have done one, but it was with a different rule set and not one that came with the original 5e. So it's cool to see that there are more people who are trying to bring that part of the fantasy alive for players. So that is what that is all about. And then the very last section, which we're not going to flip through at all, is that example adventure that they're putting here at the end of the book. If you're the GM, you're going to want to dive into that because they have a free adventure that's just a PDF online that you can download called The Promised Land. And the Blight Knight is a short adventure that they said is a good one to possibly follow up the Promised Land adventure with. So that, everybody, is our quick flip through of Runes of Symbaroum 5e, the Game Master's Guide. There is a lot here, and I mean we've talked for a little while now, but that was a very quick flip through of this book. There's so much really good content in here for the Game Master to look at, to gain knowledge about the world, and then to prepare for running your games. And I think that Free League has really blown it out of the water with this book because they've given you a lot of information in here that I feel like a lot of other companies just wouldn't have tried to do. Let's go ahead and come up from the table and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, everybody, so we're back up from the table. We've just finished taking a look at Runes of Symbaroum 5e, the Game Master's Guide, and the same goes for this book as did for the Player's Guide that we looked at previously. I'm very excited by this game, by this world. As you know, again, I am a lover of 5e, and so the fact that I know the mechanics of the game, I know how to run it, but now I just have a whole new world to showcase for my friends to run games in, makes me very, very excited. I love the fact that they didn't just come out with a setting, though. They could have just, put out a setting and that's it. Put out a setting with some creatures and called it a day. But they took the time to give us a player's guide for it with some new rules, some alterations to the rules of 5e. They give us the Game Master's Guide, which just goes into such great detail for the world itself, And then we got a whole nother book to look at with all of the creatures that they're giving us that are unique to this world as well. So I'm very excited by it. This book is great. So much awesome information in it, so full of content. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Check out all the other great videos that we're putting out daily. And until we talk again, everybody, keep on playing games.